All right, here we go again. We are still at the West Point Museum, and they are continuing to satisfy our curiosity for the objects that they have and pulling those out from behind the glass so we can actually get a little bit closer to them. We're here with Mike Diaz of the West Point Museum, and we have got another array of things to talk about. And this first item here is of great interest to me. I have a lot of interest in the Society of the Cincinnati, the oldest fraternal organization in the United States, composed of Revolution officers, but this one is a very special pin or award.
Certainly. So this badge belonged to Robert Anderson, who of course is the commandant of Fort Sumter at the start of the Civil War. His father had been an aide-de-camp to the Marquis de Lafayette during the Revolution. And when Lafayette came to the United States in 1824 on his farewell tour, he gave this badge to the young Robert Anderson, who went on to wear it with pride.
Wow, just unbelievable. So, the Society is an international organization. If you are in the French Army and you're an officer, you are, eligible for this organization here. And you tell the Anderson story so well. He's buried here. You've got the flagpole, or a flagpole from Fort Sumter and all sorts of other stuff. So what an interesting piece here. Do you have anything to add about this one?
Not just that he's a big part of Academy history, helps found the Association of Graduates. So Anderson's a big player here at West Point.
And he is certainly among, one of the first, if not the first, Union heroes of the Civil War. Right. Just lauded North and South. And when he comes back here in 1865 to Fort Sumter, you can blow up the photos and actually see him there at the flag raising of the fort that he eventually surrendered, or previously surrendered. So very cool. What else do we have?
So we have two pieces here, and no direct ties to a West Point graduate, but still huge parts of the Civil War story. And that's the formation of the United States Colored Troops. So these pieces here, these are flagpole rings that belong to the colors of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers of African Descent. This regiment starts organizing before the Emancipation Proclamation officially comes into effect. So you can make a claim that this is the first unit of black troops raised by the Union in the Civil War.
And where do these actually fit? What's going on here, as far as if people are familiar with seeing a flagstaff?
Sure. So those flagstaffs are pretty long. They do can twist apart in the middle if you want to break them down for storage. So this goes over that joining of the haft, and they join inside there. So they go right in the middle of the flagpole.
There's some beautiful detail on there that I imagine Chris White behind the camera got there. So I like that interesting period before the Emancipation Proclamation, before the authorization officially, before these colored troops started taking the field. There's all these people, Benjamin Butler and others out west, really starting to form their own sort of, units that are quasi-legal, and maybe it didn't matter during the Civil War, but when they do form the colored troops, and I think there's a lot of valuable service under the United States moniker, but also under state monikers as well. And the most famous of all the state units just has to be the 54th Massachusetts.
Of course. And this coat belonged to James Morris Walton, who's an officer in the 54th, ends the war as a major, so you see the major's rank on his shoulder straps there. He's a Quaker, comes from Pennsylvania, so there's a lot of good Quaker stock down there. And he's old enough, certainly, to join the war when the fighting starts. So it seems to wait until he can volunteer for a USCT regiment to get involved. Had been a lawyer, so spends much of the war serving as a provost or a judge advocate. So don't think he's at Fort Wagner. I don't think he really had much of a field command in the regiment. But still, that was joined up, as far as we can tell, for the cause and served all the way through the end of the war.
I think that's just great, because I think that the 54th has a lot of great service other than at just Fort Wagner. We shouldn't reduce them just down to that famous moment, as important and interesting as it is. They're at the Battle of Olustee most famously, and really outperforming, many of the other Union units as well, white troops included, at that particular battle in North Florida, Florida's largest battle. And when I look at this and this type of service here, you can see the blue background for the infantry. Some of you know that I am drawn towards shoulder boards and straps and insignia. And look at the incredible detail that goes into, showing that rank and grade. And if you want to get a little bit more advanced, you can study these things for years and not have it all down based on the color of the leaves in there. As a lieutenant colonel versus a major, Chris White behind the camera told me, and I hadn't noticed notice it at the beginning, but there's some buttons on the back, sort of back flaps, and there's pockets, you know, back there. So studying the actual pieces allows you to get closer to them. And for those who reenact or even put on a friend who happens to be a reenactor's coat, it brings you a little closer to the conflict. And, you know, I tried. They're not going to let me put on this coat. We do have, you know, some aging going on with it there, but you can't blame me for trying. Putting on an original coat, if somebody were unintelligent enough to let me, would be a cool experience.
Certainly. I'm a big advocate of living history, big advocate, of course, to coming to museums and seeing this stuff up close. Because, yeah, seeing those little details on the uniforms, how they're, you know, what made them wearable and what made them functional. It brings you closer to understanding of the daily life of the people that make American history.
Yeah, and I think this is great. So we started with Fort Sumter. It's hard to get more beginning-ish than that. Some people like to argue. It's hard to say what's first because people like to argue about that. But we've got Fort Sumter. We've got the mid-war change in attitude, at least in the North, among many Northern soldiers about what they're fighting for, what they told us they were fighting for. And then we can come to the end of the Civil War with this incredible piece.
Yes. This bugle was played by the bugler of the 3rd Brigade of Custer's Cavalry Division at the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse. He sounds the charge, and that brigade is on the attack when they see a white flag come up from the Confederates to begin surrender negotiations. So we consider that this bugle blew the last charge call of the Civil War, at least of the Army of the Potomac.
And here it is within your collections. It is appropriately ornate with all of the trappings that come with it as well. I can see some dents on it, attesting to some of the use that it might have seen here.
And there's some marks of wear and tear, but also that's in really good condition because so many things from Appomattox got turned into souvenirs or turned into artifacts at that moment. People realized they were living through a historic moment, and immediately they started efforts to preserve the tokens of their time there.
I think that's a great point. You try to find, you know, intact things from the room where Lee and Grant met at Appomattox. The flags, the furniture, everything is, you know, practically torn apart. And there's some examples we still have, including this from actually the battle. There's a battle at the station nearby, Appomattox Station, preserved in large part by the members of the American Battlefield Trust and by some of our partners. Same with the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse itself, which is also very interesting. And we preserved a whole bunch of land there as well, including some of the last land where the ceasefire and white flag Custer is riding over. So we're really proud of that movement as well. And I think this is another place where people are in danger of saying the last. It is the end of Lee's army, but it's not the last action. It's not the last surrender. It's not the largest surrender, but it is in popular culture, in popular memory, the surrender.
Right.
It is effectively the end of the Civil War for many.
Yeah, and I think that they knew that they had gone through some kind of sea change there, where it was certainly the beginning of the end.
Right. Now, coming up from the Civil War, which saw the first medals of honor, we have another video where we're going to show you the first Medal of Honor awarded during the Civil War. All those other conflicts in between them and the World Wars also had, you know, medals of honor awarded for various distinctive and actions and conduct. Well, here we have something moving way ahead concerning the Medal of Honor and another first.
Yes. So this is the first Medal of Honor awarded during the Second World War. Was given posthumously to Alexander Nininger, who's a class of 1941 graduate of West Point. Nininger was assigned to the Philippine Scouts. His company was a rear line unit, but he volunteered to join an attack that was being made at Bataan, and ends up leading this charge into a Japanese position, is involved in hand-to-hand fighting, and unfortunately he's killed there. So the medal was awarded to the family, and then the family later donated it to the museum.
Absolutely fascinating. I just think in looking at what you took out from behind the glass for us today, you know, it might seem like this is a set of disparate items, but I imagine if you had a staff of 50, they could spend the rest of their careers just trying to understand the connections between these objects. Just while we were standing here, I was wondering, well, how are these things sort of connected? Well, you know, we've got U.S. Colored troops connections, and that might not seem like it's connected to George Armstrong Custer in particular at that time, but Custer's at the Battle of Gettysburg, members of the 54th Mass. Some of them were raised actually in Gettysburg. That's just a connection off the top of my head, and what do you know? I managed to make it a Gettysburg connection. But I would imagine we could come up with hundreds of others just from these objects on the table, to say nothing of the thousands, tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands.
Of objects that you actually have within the collection. So I can't thank you enough. Anything to add about this stuff, Mike?
No, just like you said, there's a lifetime's worth of work here. We invite people to come in and see what we do.
That sounds like job security to me. And for you, we hope you enjoyed seeing some of these things from behind the glass. We really appreciate you watching and helping to witness history a little bit with some of the witnesses that were actually there. Mike, Aaron, everybody at the West Point Museum, and everybody at West Point, Chris behind the camera, thanks so much for watching and supporting all of our efforts of battlefield preservation and education.